Aloha, everyone. Welcome to the Neutral Zone. It's anything but neutral. Today, I have a special guest. I have Niles James. Niles is here on Maui. Hi, Niles. How are you today?
Aloha, Jason. I'm doing very well. Very
Now,
well. Really bright and early.
oh, bright and early. I was going to say, this is the earliest that I have ever done a show, except when I was doing someone in Pakistan, and then that was a whole different thing. You're here on Maui, and you're up early for me, but late for you. You're a
Right.
farmer, would you say? Would that be if I was going to try to define Niles James, I'd say, wow, there's so much I can talk about. How would you define you?
I guess you could say farmer, or you could say steward of the land, or you could say kukiai mauna, or not mauna, but aina. We fight for what's right for the land, for the natives, and that's kind of what we are. Is we build soil, we create soil, and that's what we really farm. And then everything that comes out of that is a value-added product, such as vegetables, and then even beyond that, when you start making lilikoi butters and stuff such as that too. So.
So you're a farmer who, I guess they say farm to table. To most of your products, do you take them all the way to the client, or you grow it, you're regenerating the soil,
Absolutely.
and then out of it comes a product like a tomato or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and
Carrot
you
top
get it
butter.
to people that use it. Have you been doing this a long time? I know that you were brought onto our group because you have special skills. You're
Yes.
you're recognized as really the best person to do what we needed to do.
Well, awesome. Thank you.
Um, what have you been doing? Have you been doing this a long time? You're young to be a wise old sage in our group.
Yes, I'm definitely an old soul. So if you go back into my family as far back on my father's side, the generations of farmers just continues to go and go and go. And I actually didn't find an end point with that. On Maui, more importantly, I have been a lot in the restaurant or hospitality industry. I worked for about 10 years in the restaurant hospitality industry, gaining a lot of relationships with chefs and owners and different restaurants, which allow us to be able to showcase our produce and value added products to chefs and restaurants around. But we focus primarily on CSA, which is community supported agriculture. So we really want to cater more to the community versus toward the tourism industry. A lot of the chefs we deal with are more local based restaurants opposed to tourism based restaurants. And so that's really what we go for in that style. Yet I've been doing this for probably about 3 or 4 years now. Um, I know farmers that have been doing this for 10 or 15 years, and we like to tell everybody we still don't know anything. Farming is just basically an experimental process that we have this passion and love with the land, and we share this coexistence, and then we just learn and teach ourselves. And so there's always something new to learn from everybody you come across with. Every crop that you plant, whether it's in the same section or it's in a different section, you really just enable your brain to create the solution oriented mentality versus a problem oriented mentality. And that's what we do, is that we don't see problems as obstacles. We see those as areas of opportunity to create these solutions and to continue to move forward. And that's what we need in food security here in Maui.
So let me see if I can understand. You get a piece of land. Some is your own land that you farm yourself, but
Correct.
also you work with other farmers to help them get the best yield, both in quality of product, quantity of product, and what's in it, but also the soil itself is your first level of focus, or
Oh,
would you say?
absolutely. Soil is always priority number one, because without soil, we have nothing.
So you
Without,
help people build their soil and create an environment for things to be optimum. You're
correct.
trying to save our planet like me, but
I'm
you're
trying. Absolutely.
in 40 years I may not be here, but you will. And
Yeah.
so you are the planes taking off on, I hope, my runway. I've been running at this environmental thing for so long. People forget that it's a conscious choice we take every day. We can all make a big difference. So How did you get started? You're doing it in family all these years. Were you here on Maui or you were other places?
So I was born in Utah, but my father always lived on Oahu. So I grew up primarily in Kailua, Kaneohe, and out in Ewa. And so I was always acclimated to Hawaii when I was very young. I remember walking on Kailua Beach when I was 5 years old and saying, "This is where I want to be for the rest of my life."
Wow.
So when I ended up coming out here, going back, my family had a 90-acre tobacco and corn farm down in Kentucky at one point in time. They ended up selling it a long time ago. But I got into restaurants so I could kind of survive here, with the hope that one day that I would be able to be a steward of the land, to be able to live more sustainably and be able to either hunt or grow anything that I need to consume. And so I'm working on that. I'm not anywhere perfect on that whatsoever, but it's one of my big lifetime goals is anything that I get off the land or anything that I grow. That's really what I'm going for in order for consumption, because I think the importation of what we do in the sense of 80 to 90% of goods here into Maui is very detrimental to the entire world, let alone just our ecosystem, our food sovereignty here in Maui.
Isn't that amazing? 80 to 90% of the food is imported, and we still have to get many people here to understand the importance of self-sustainability. Can you imagine? We've had these situations on occasion where the shipping lanes stop or things are happening in the world, like maybe a COVID virus, where no matter what's going on, and we can be ready to have it all coming in, we're all ready to go.
Yeah.
And they say, wait a minute, we weren't able to grow enough. Sorry. Wait, we need now because we've got troubles. Wait. We can't wait. We are stuck in the most remote landmass in the world, and we should have been doing it. Do you find that the things that you do are in some ways similar to the native culture? Because I know that our native culture was all self-sustainable way back.
And so this day and age, everybody likes to speak about regenerative agriculture. And I think it's an important conversation, but I think it's just another phrasing for indigenous agriculture. And that's really what we're doing is we're going back to the most basic of systems that have already been created and used for thousands of years by the indigenous cultures, such as the Hawaiians and their ahupua. And that's what they did is they basically farmed from the top of the mountain all the way down to the bottom of not the bottom of the ocean, but towards the shore. And so that's really what I like to say, and why I like to say I'm a steward of the land, because I'm so much more than somebody who just farms the land. I'm taking care of that land. That is my kuleana, my responsibility to do that. So yeah, I really like to use the terminology indigenous agriculture because it's something that they mastered for the entire lifetime of their history.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. And taking those notes and really separating myself, which was something we can talk about later, to be able to revitalize that culture in the native fauna or endemic fauna or the canoe crops that were brought over here, and really just trying to reintroduce those, or not reintroduce, but introduce those more into areas that are in need of those crops.
And are you marketing as your farm, or are you marketing as you? I'm not sure. Farming is quite a thing. Not only do you have to figure out how to grow it and grow it well, then you have to find out where to sell it.
Absolutely.
And how to get enough of it. Many of us who are consumers always hear that the farmers only get a couple of pennies out of $1 of stuff because everybody else is adding on price. Is it a challenge to be a farmer financially? Is it a lot of, I don't know what wholesale and retail are, but sure, when I go into a store here and they tell me, oh, this avocado is $2.89 each. And then what? You go to the next store and there's a bag of 6 of them. They came from California and they cost $3. Wow, I can buy $3 for all these from California. How does a farmer that wants to grow locally and figure out how to survive here? It must be quite an interesting challenge.
So I think what you said it best, and there's a big difference between older generations and new generations. Is the older generations are more about farming. And when you come into the new generation, we have social media, we have marketing, we have branding, and we have experiences. And so I think the most important aspect that any farmer or farm business can take away is about creating an experience. Is that you don't need to sell a product, you just need to create an experience. And so when you create experiences, the consumer supports you and your farm. So then again, the disconnect between our food, our farmers, and our consumers is so vast that that's why it's so much easier to say I can save money by paying $3 for all these avocados versus paying $2.75 for one avocado. So what you do is, or what we do specifically, is we create a brand behind our experiences through our marketability, through our communication. When people reach out to me on any social media platform and they ask me a question about farming, we're there to answer it. So we've created this brand of Ho'omakua, which is our farm. So it's not directly from me. It's through the partnership between my significant other, Ashley Hogue, and myself, is that it's not difficult when you can bridge the gap between the consumer and the farmer. When they have that symbiotic relationship, then it's not necessarily I'm paying $3 or I'm paying $2.75 for one avocado. I'm paying $2.75 to support my farmer, like my mechanic or my doctor. And when you have that relationship with that farmer, you no longer look at the product as this is something that I'm consuming because I need to consume it. You start looking at it as this is my farmer and I want to support my farmer because I believe in food security. I believe in food sovereignty. I believe in regenerative and organic methods. And I want to continue this basis with my family and my children. And that's really the market that we have, is that the parents that care so deeply that their children know where their food comes from. I don't think at a certain point that pricing matters when that connection and that relationship and that experience is created through that bond of the farmer to the consumer, which is why we focus really on community supported agriculture, CSA, and giving harvest boxes or doing add-ons and being really communicable or communicating really well over social media platforms or any platform that we're given that we can put in face of our consumer and our clients.
Well, that's very powerful and important. And I imagine, let's make sure I'm here with Niles James. I'm Jason Schwartz here on KAKU 88.5. Niles, when you talk about that, about your connection with the end user, it's such an unusual world that I'm older. And so I remember where we heard there was, I'm from New York City, so I knew there was something called a farm, but it was far away. And it used to be a thing, they say, kids in the city never see animals. I saw lots of animals, but you could put me in front of, I can grow rose bushes because we had the right fertilizer in my backyard. And I can maybe, if I'm lucky, grow a row of something. But it is it's an experience trying to grow. So we had no connection at all. And now in this time of social media, what a great opportunity for people to get in touch with where their food comes from. And I would bet if we sat there and looked at these two avocados, that they all look the same, but what's in them? So that's what soil regeneration is, isn't it? It's like, it's nice to know they all look the same, but behind this cardboard wall in the movie, there's nothing. There's no town. That was just the front of a town. Right. Same in produce. You can have something and you think it looks beautiful, but it tastes like cardboard. It's one of those movie sets that really doesn't have in it what's good. So I imagine do you guys do that with your clients, or that sort of goes along with this whole education piece you do?
Yeah, it definitely goes along with it. In the first initial periods of people transitioning, especially during the COVID happenings, where people became more reliant on where their food comes from and sourcing CSA, it was almost a punch in the face, for lack of a better term, of how the flavor profiles were so different when somebody actually puts the passion and care into what they're growing versus the quantity of which they're growing. Quality over quantity is something that we always we preach to, is because when you start mass producing anything, you start losing some of that authenticity. And that's something that we never want to do. We never want to substitute our authenticity and our genuineness out for anything that's going to make our lives easier. We'd rather our lives be harder with a better quality product than our lives be easier with a lower quality product. So
And
we urge people multiple times to do taste tests because
well,
that's the easiest way to tell.
well, it's funny. It's funny to me. I live all these years ago when we talked about these things. It was not important. It's not important. Now the whole west coast of the United States is drying up, and there's less produce, and people are getting more aware of the words local sourcing, more aware of that they may not be able to do it here. How can they learn a better way? Do you spend a lot of your time educating, or most of your time growing? I imagine farming is super intensive time
Yes.
wise.
So I have a constant struggle because I spend as much time farming as I try to spend educating. And so a lot of that's either through social media platforms or through workshops. And so if I didn't have the validation from people from time to time, I probably wouldn't spend so much time on social media trying to teach and trying to outreach to people and try to answer questions. But because it is so beneficial and helpful to other people, including myself, teaching other people helps me teach myself, because you can only talk to yourself for so much in the field before you start feeling crazy. And so expressing it outwardly to other people that are having the same kind of questions allows you to strategically think. And so I do both. I think the most important aspect of education is inspiration. Is without inspiration, there's no education. You can't demean somebody and then educate them, because they're never going to retain that information. So it's just about showing aloha and inspiring people, whether it's through color variations or varieties, or the permaculture style of how we design things, or just expressing how those things have designed and how they interwork with each other. So I like to do both. And I'm very passionate about farming, but I'm very passionate about farming because I think it's a huge necessity. And like you said, localvore. Yeah, it would be great if my produce makes it around the world, but that's not the purpose of what a farmer is doing, or not the purpose of what supporting local is. What I want to do with whatever we produce here on Maui is I want to keep it on Maui. And then maybe when it becomes too much, then I want to send it to Molokai, or I want to send it to Oahu or something of that nature, keeping it in Hawaii. And so educating people about how local is the most important aspect, and what we do here may be not something that you can necessarily do in your location, but as long as you're recreating the environment of which the plant or the crop grows, you can grow almost anything. And so again, just that educational outpiece of, there's trial and tribulations. There's plenty of times that failures happen in farming, but failure isn't an end goal. It's just, again, an area of opportunity to be able to re-strategize and rethink and move forward.
Well, let me talk about that education piece, because I'm involved with you know them, Michael Smith and Diane Carter, Regenitech, soil regeneration, and so much more. But taking growing algae, and creating a biofuel, and using a process of pyrolysis, not burning because you don't have oxygen,
Right.
and then extracting things off there and supplementing back into the soil. It sounds like a cauldron, like you were trying to create the soil that plant is growing in.
Right.
So you got involved in our project because you're someone who does that educating. You're someone who says, look, if we're going to do a test to see how things grow, we need to start here, and we need to have different so you've helped us set up a demonstration, if you will, that's going to show the end of this thing, and really clearly show people that you can generate an amazing product. You can regenerate and get the soil to be back where our goal of self-sustainability is going to become easier, because we're building from the local and keep building and building. How are we doing on our soil here on island? Have you checked raw soil in different places? I bet you have.
Yeah, so I've taken a soil sample from the depths of McKenna or Wailea up to Crater Road, which is on Haleakala at 4,000 feet. Um, I have some from Lahaina. I have some from Haiku. So yeah, I've taken soil samples, and the difference in the textures and the content is just so amazing that no soil is like the other, and that's because we have so many microclimates here in Hawaii or Maui itself.
So like what we're doing, like we call it a feasibility study, right? Which means how feasible it is to use this stuff here. So you take raw soil, as you're doing it, you're setting up the same kind of tests in different microclimates. I want to say up the chain here, for whatever the
Right.
chain is. Um, have you? I know we're not at the end of feasibility study. What are you seeing? You're seeing interesting things happening.
Oh, absolutely. So Central Valley, next to Lakahea, we're doing a study there on kalo, and we're doing a microbiology study as well as different variations of dilutions of the biostimulant that derives from that algae. And we're going to do a plant tissue test on the biostimulant to see how the plants react and to see what kind of genetic makeup they're taking on and to see any kind of stress that they're taking on as well. And then the microbiology was basically a starting point to see how much micrology is going on in that particular area. And then we're going to apply the super slime that we like to call it over a 10-week basis or 10-week period to see how much progression there has been or how much more activity there has been from that specifically. And typically we would be cover cropping that area and then drenching that. And so we have a control area, and by control what I mean is that we have an area that we do nothing to. So we water it as normal, and that's basically it. And so that's a nice starting point or a comparison to look at our other area that we're working with our microbiology or micrology with that super slime, and to see the difference in the cover crop and how tall the actual super slime cover crop section is versus the control where there's nothing done to that. It's amazing to see the results and the reaction of these plants such as kalo. And we're also doing some out in hana for citrus. I'm doing it for lettuce, and that will be starting with you this week. And then I also have another Makawa farm that's doing lettuce, and again, a couple different variations. And we wanted to do leafy greens for the plant tissue test just to get a really good idea of what the experiment entails versus the plant tissue test for trees, and see how it affects the trees as well, because that's what we grow, right? We grow vegetables and citrus and other things, but those are pretty much the two primary categories of what our produce takes up.
And I imagine you're also measuring the soil before and after.
Yeah, so what we did for the micrology or the super slime test is we did a standard soil test, and then we did a PLFA test, which is basically again a micrology test to see how much microbiology is going on in that soil. And so we have a nice starting point, and then over that time we'll come back at the end of the 10 weeks or maybe a little after if we decide, and that's when we'll take the other soil sample and we'll compare them, and then we'll put that into our feasibility study and analysis to see what the difference was and how applicable it would be to have here in Maui specifically.
Well, some of the early pictures I see, progress as things are going along, it's pretty dramatic what we see. I mean, just physically see where you look and you realize, come on, you must have put something on there besides that little green stuff, that green slime. How just roughly, how do you put this stuff in? Everyone, I guess, is available. They buy it and add water. How do you make a mixture like this?
Yeah, so basically it's a certain dilution of water to the product. And so in some of them, it's going to be a quarter cup to a half cup to a full cup and to 1.5 cups for the micrology. So we're doing the difference in dilutions to see what the plant's reaction is to those dilutions. So when we start showcasing the product or marketing the product, we have an exact, well, not exact, I would say, because there's still some fluctuations, but we have a fluctuation of how much dilution you should put on the plant before it becomes too much for the plant and before it starts to have nutrient lockout and things such as those.
That's an interesting word, nutrient lockdown. What does that mean? Too
Uh,
much of something?
so basically, so when you when you when you fertigate or when you fertilize in a liquid basis, you're forcing the plant to take all the nutrients at one time versus a top dressing of dry nutrients. The plant will take what it wants when it needs to. So when you overfeed a plant, let's just say too much nitrogen, it starts to have nitrogen lockout and it starts to have deficiencies because it has been given too much of one nutrient or multiple nutrients that it no longer can continue to take it, and it goes into shock. And so the plant starts having these issues.
That sounds like the fertilizer industry to me.
And
They
and so that's one of the biggest problems that I see is that Monsanto and Bayer has so much money for marketing that everybody thinks that the only way to grow food is with Miracle Grow soil, Miracle Grow fertilizer, and this is how I do it. When really all it takes is just a little bit of education or research to show that, yeah, if I need nitrogen, there's multiple other products that I can use that are regenerative or organic or that are not synthetic chemicals that I can use for nitrogen or calcium or phosphorus, bananas and eggs, and I mean nitrogen feather meal, among other things. So there's all these different answers out there, but they have just poured so much money into advertising and marketing, into governments and everything else that we could go into, that they've just flooded the market, and nobody has the time or the willingness to go outside that normality of what the advertising is to really see what the difference is. And that's what we're kind of getting now in this last half decade, maybe, is that people are awakening to finding new resources to be able to grow regeneratively or organically because they don't want to continue to poison their families.
and I'm sure I've already heard from other areas using this Regenitech product to be able to heal the soil and get rid of some of those chemicals. You know, we heard words like glyphosate. We've heard all kinds of exciting things around Monsanto on how they're poisoning us, and Roundup. Um, that's part of what you're doing, isn't it? You're trying to really make that soil better and grow good plants all at the same time, and then put things down to make the soil better and the soil better. Do you find in some of the areas you work at that over time you use less and less supplement and your soil is really improving it over the years? I imagine you see that.
Well, even just in, so the last farm that I was doing a lot of work on, I had somebody that was there for 3 years. And after I came in and I started doing all the things that I typically do in the sense of rotating beds and putting organic material back into the beds, they said the increase in soil fertility, or the fluffiness, we like to call it the chocolate cake, the fluffiness chocolate cake layer, basically, um, just became so much more prominent. And when we're working with a lot of clay, especially where we were, it's amazing to hear that in such a small amount of time you're still able to see great progress. When I first got there, I could hardly put a pitchfork into the ground in some places because the soil was so compacted, and again, lots of clay, lots of heat, lots of moisture, and so it just compacts, or not lots of moisture but a good amount of moisture, and allow it to compact. And so basically what I do is I just, everything that I possibly can, I put back into the soil. So that means if I have a whole row of broccoli that I've harvested, I've come back now and I've mowed that. And then I rotary plow, which is basically walking through the footpaths and taking soil and throwing it onto the bed and allowing all that to decompose. So when you start learning these tricks of the trade of how I can farm soil, because again, that's the most important aspect to me, especially here in Hawaii, is taking care of the Aina, um, to making it look, to putting it back, giving it, leaving it better than what I received it in. When you start learning those tricks of everything plays back into each other, whether it goes back into the soil immediately or you use it and you compost it and you put it back into the soil 6-8 months later, that's really what you want to do, is these closed loop systems of creating all of your own biomass, and really taking heed of that, and putting everything you possibly can into the soil that's beneficial, that's organic, that's natural. When I say natural, I mean a plant naturally going back into the earth and decomposing in a way that's allowing the nutrients to go back into the soil. You really start to see a huge difference. When you're dependent on industrial agriculture and you're seeing these big fallow fields where they have 10-foot spacing of tractor space that has no cover crops or nothing, and it's just dirt, and they just keep putting chemicals or nutrients back into the soil to be able to grow, is there's no micrology there. And that's what grows things. Obviously nutrients and trace minerals and stuff are right there with it, but if you have no microbiology going on in the soil and there's no life, you're not going to have life. There's no going to be no life or energy into that food, and then you're consuming that food and you're taking on that bad energy, those chemicals, those toxins, and you're deteriorating your body. And so yeah, again, is when you start learning those regenerative or indigenous practices of everything goes back into the soil, and you start seeing the results almost instantaneous. And instantaneous, again, a year, and a farmer's mindset is probably a year or so, because nothing happens instantaneous. It takes 45 days to 2 months minimum to grow anything. Well, you could get microgreens maybe in 14 days, but food takes a while to grow, and seeing results usually takes a while to grow. But with these practices that I've been doing, as well as this biostimulant from Regenitech, like you're starting to see immediate results. You're starting to see the comparisons, and that's the importance of experimentation and control areas, is because without any kind of starting point or control, you really don't have a comparison. And so when I have 5 trays of lettuce, one's my control, one's my quarter, one's my half, one's my full, and one's a foliar spray, you really start to see the differences in just normal behaviors of, I have these seeded in trays for 4 weeks. I feed them once a week with the biostimulant, and you start seeing the difference. And that's the only difference, is literally the dilution of what you're putting on it or how it's applied, whether it's, again, dressed liquid in a liquid form, or it's dressed in a powder form, or it's dressed in a foliar spray, which is still liquid, but it's going directly onto the plant tissue, or sorry, the plant leaves, versus being soaked in by the root system.
Right. Wow. Do you find that you have a lot of young people that are thinking about farming? I mean, I know that when I was growing up, farmer wasn't even in our choices to give the list of
Right.
possible career choices. Farmer never hit the list.
Never.
But now I hear lots of people, I say lots of people, many more people are, I want to do this. And even if I'm not going to have a big field of this, I want to do this even in my own little world.
Absolutely.
So can people do this kind of thing on an individual basis? I imagine they can.
I definitely agree, with the right tools and the right, let's just say, mentor, which could be anybody that's growing, or the right attention. When you work with something every single day, you start to notice the habits of the plant, that is. I used to say, and I guess up until maybe right now, I would say that I'm the next generation farmer, but really I'm this generation farmer. It's our generation's time to step up to this farming. So yeah, I think there are lots of young people that are interested and intrigued, because one, they care about sustainability, they care about sovereignty, they care about climate change, they care about these natural ways of what the world is. So they're stepping up to the plate. But I think without the educational aspect, that's what makes life harder, is if there's nobody to look to for these answers, or for these teachings, or for these mentorships, then it becomes a lot harder to grasp, because the information isn't willingly there. But I think we're there. I think we're at the time frame of the information is becoming there. People are doing more market garden or master classes, and people are signing up for it. So yeah, I think we lost a big opportunity during COVID, because there was a lot of transitional periods here for people, especially in Maui, where they were working restaurants or hospitality, and then that basically dissolved over a year span. So we could have captivated a very large audience that was looking for something to do in the sense of work. In Maui, even if you're on unemployment, it's really hard to get behind. Once you get behind, you stay behind typically, and then you see a lot of transient people end up leaving. And so I had probably 5 people that would have been willing to work for me at that point in time, and I wasn't in a position, because of partnerships, to be able to hire and to bring other people on, which is really unfortunate, because I missed out on a couple really good people that I could have had under my wing at this point, and starting to build the 5 farms, which is my goal in the next 5 years.
Oh, well, do you Do you think that in what you're doing, you're finding that there's I just keep looking locally. You know, you talked about originally calling this indigenous agriculture. Have there been, that would probably be an interesting thing, maybe it's already happening, to create online course to show how the indigenous agriculture and the local agriculture go hand in hand and work together. The young people that I see, um, I guess I'm talking about the very, very young ones. They're looking for to leaders like you to teach them because they seem to be hungry, looking for something. The
Right.
young Hawaiian kids, I may be, you know, putting things onto it, but there's a tremendous pride in the Hawaiian community, and I would love to see agriculture and teaching of these methods that you're doing to get a more global reach, you know, to for us to be an example to the world in the most remote land masses in the world, to grow and to improve our soil and to be independent and to have everyone involved in that idea of supporting each other, local product that has greater quality, and everyone's happier because the cost they spend, the money they spend on things don't have to be spent because they can now be growing it. And you know, we talked about the $3 for a bag of avos versus avo one for $3. You probably could find more nutrients in that one, and that's why I'm going back. All this comes together where money doesn't become an issue, like you say. It's a local thing to have everyone grow up, learn the trade that's going to save our planet, regenerate our soils, grow good quality food, care about each other. It's like all this sort of works together to me, you know. In our world now, we separate things out into categories, maybe because there's just so many people we have to separate because there's just too many of them. But when it boils back down, they all fit together. Isn't that what self-sustainability is? An everything model, like you said. So you put the stuff back in the soil, you're growing it and you eat it, and then however it comes out, it all is regenerating. I'm hoping that leaders like yourself, who have really high, powerful, positive spirit, can bring our present and future generation into a place where we can be sold. People, everyone you see that's old like me with all this silver hair, we've been abusing this earth. I mean, it's beyond even casual. We can't, how can one deny that we're so far down the road toward bad. We got to do dramatic things that are good, even if they cost more.
Right.
Because it will, otherwise we're not going to have a planet. People are, I hope that's what I like keep sharing, that the young people are picking up the shovel and picking up the hoe and learning from people like yourself who will be the grandfathers someday, who hopefully are going to help what I do, which is at least be aware we blew it and it's time to change it. Now you guys are there. How is it moving? Are you seeing enthusiasm? Are you getting greater yields and things like that? I know the product we're trying to add is hopefully going to be a giant game changer, but you've been doing this without that kind of stuff. Are people jumping in? You know, like, I don't know how to say it any other way. I'm concerned that young people don't find it sexy enough to go out and be a farmer. Although
And I like that you said
that.
So I believe I know his name is Travis Wu, and I believe he's on Big Island. And he came over for one of the conferences one time, and he said there's a lot of things I disagreed with him on, and this one thing that I took away very, very much so is we have to sell social media. We have to sell the rock star lifestyle. And so when you think of agriculture, you think industrial agriculture, you think hot, humid, dusty, dirt, not soil, dirt out in the middle of this field, and you're sunburnt, all these other things. But with social media and our new style of market gardening or regenerative agriculture, indigenous agriculture, what we're doing is we're selling and showcasing a lifestyle, a rock star lifestyle. Who wouldn't want to be in 4 acres of lush permaculture food forest that has an acre of vegetables with 40 different varieties and every color of the rainbow that you could ever imagine? That's what we're selling, and that's how you inspire and then educate the young, or you intrigue them in order to want this, to want to grow and to be part of what that means in the community. Is farmers don't grow for themselves, we grow for the community, and that's what we're here for. And so yeah, I think there's a lot of uptrend on farming and agriculture and sustainability. Sustainability has been a huge word over the last decade, and they're becoming more and more driven to grow food, to know where it comes from, whether it's in their backyard or it's their farmer. Yes, absolutely. Again, in social media has so many different cons to it, but it also has so many pros to it as well. Like you said before, the outreach that I can now grasp people from Pakistan or Argentina or China, where they're asking questions of what we do, or they're like, oh my gosh, we have that tree here because it's a nitrogen fixer and it's a legume and it creates shade cover and organic material, leaf litter that goes back into the soil that creates mulch and all these other different aspects of things. So yeah, it's again selling that rock star lifestyle is showcasing that, yeah, farming is absolutely hard. It's very hard, and no matter how passionate you are about it, it doesn't take away from the hardness of what the tasks are. But the passion that you get with it and the fulfillment that you get with it, it's just something else. It's to see barren, to see nothing, and to create green, or to create food, and to create this network of self-sustaining permaculture forest or food forest or vegetable beds is just it's incredible. And so that's what we're showcasing how you start from nothing to something, how you continuously get good yields with low input, because that's when you do all the work on the front end, such as a permaculture style of everything, kind of a whole systems approach, which is what Evan Ryan would say, a whole systems approach, that everything feeds into the other and everything has multiple purposes to it. You're putting all the work on the front end and you're really making your life easier on the back end.
Which is why I said we blew it. Now it's time we got to dig in and do a little bit more, because we didn't do it before.
Right.
And
if I may, I think that's going back to what I said about it takes microgreens a couple weeks, but food 45 days to a couple months. It's the investment needs to happen now. The investment for Maui needs to happen now. The investment for shell gas of regenerative means of energy needs to happen now, because down the road it's going to be too late. When the fires happen or the tsunamis happen or any kind of natural disaster happens, we're the last on the list. They don't care about Maui. Maui and Hawaii is last. They will not, and I repeat, they will not send food to us, period. And when we rely on 80 to 90% importation of goods and it takes 2 months to grow food, then farmers can't make food pop like that. And so we really need to, as a community in Maui and Hawaii itself, we really need to invest in our farmers, which the County Council of Maui has done in the last 2 years, which is absolutely amazing. I'm very appreciative of our council that we have right now. It's because there's going to be disasters and they're going to continue until we do something dramatic enough where we start getting a grasp on the tipping point of what's going on in climate change. And that's what we need to do right now. And the more demand there is from local agriculture and local produce, the growth can be exponentially. It can be tenfold. I mean, there's so much room. When you import 80 to 90% of food, there's so much room for progress. Like, I don't see it as it's terrible, but I see it, again, area of opportunity, because I'm a solution oriented person. I see solutions in every problem that I'm given. And so I just look at it as that means we can increase our agriculture by 90%. That's astronomical. That's plenty of jobs. And it needs to be in a responsible manner. Growing food is better than having concrete, but it has to be responsible. It,
So
I,
when you look at a large farmer like a Mahi Pono, you probably see some good and some bad. And you're not one to smack them across the face because you'd like to educate them. And I know all that kind of stuff is happening.
pros and cons to everything in life. Yes, Mahi Pono is growing food in a very different way than I would choose to grow food. And again, I spent a lot of my years in the last decade fighting Monsanto, fighting Alexandra and Baldwin, and I got to a point where they were too big of a monster to fight, that I needed to fight the fight that I could, which is what I'm doing now, is growing food. So I have a vague relationship with Mahi Pono, and that's what I try to do, is I try to be that outreach person that if they ever have a question or they ever have, I want them to ask me, because I want them to be successful in the sense of growing regenerative and organic produce. And although they're not there yet, I want them to be there over I want concrete going into Central Valley, which it's a whole nother conversation, and it takes a lot of money and time, but companies have a lot of money and time. And so my ultimate nightmare is to see Central Valley look like Aiea or Honolulu or Waikiki, whichever you want to call it. And that's what I really don't want. So growing food is better than placing concrete, but there's still responsible ways to do that, and to not create toxins in our soil and toxins in our body. I'm very, what is that called? I'm very not cautious. I'm very prone. So basically, when I try a vegetable, I can taste if there's anything on it in the sense of being sprayed. And I'm very sensitive. That was the word that I'm looking for. I'm very sensitive, and I get migraines very easily. And so when I eat produce like that, it doesn't sit right with me, and I can taste the chemical flavor, and I start getting migraine and I get sick. And so just in that little taste test, because again, taste tests are important to have to be able to tell the difference of quality. And I just, it's so different when you eat chemically introduced food versus there's there's biopesticides and bioinsecticides that we can use in an organic method that are organic certified. But the fact of spraying something, my friend Joel says that you just plant enough food for the bugs to eat. And I mean, that's part of the ecosystem, right? And I think somebody else said to me, if bugs aren't eating your food, then your food's not part of the ecosystem. And so you have to account for a 10% loss, or let's just say 20% loss if you want to go higher. And the loss isn't necessarily a loss as long as you put it back into compost, or you can still mow it and put it back into the soil. And so what you're doing is you're not wasting anything, and you're not spraying proactively, you're just accounting for it. So maybe I need to plant more cauliflower.
And it sounds like what you're talking about is accounting is actually it. You're not losing anything. Everything is there and is gaining. It's just how we identify it and see it.
Right. Perception.
Thank you for being a hero with all this here. In what we're doing, we're going to do another little segment where we're going to show the feasibility study and all the little steps. We're going to do that here. But it's important for our whole world to know that there are people like you, and Maui needs to know that what we're all doing has people just like you, except you have your specialty and you are good at it. And it's so nice. The farmers here that I know, the small local farmers, become a community. And like you say, it becomes a culture. Who wouldn't like to be part of that community with great lofty ideals, and they're actually doing it, and you can be part of it and helping our future so that your grandkids can eat a tomato that doesn't taste like it's been, there's tomato in there somewhere.
Right. It doesn't taste like sulfur or some other chemical nutrient that they just pump in there. Absolutely.
Anything that you'd like to share with an audience here? I don't want to just keep driving it.
No. And I want to touch back on what you just said in the sense of the community, the collectivisticness of what our agricultural industry is here. I would say mostly, I don't know one, honestly, but we all see this as we're not competitive. There's no competition between farmers here. Even though a lot of farmers grow the same stuff, there's no competition. We're such a collectivistic tight-knit community that I have great relationships with Evan Ryan at Ponagrome Farms, Michael at Lapa'au Farms, Hokuao at Noho'ana Farms. So we have these great relationships because, like I said, Evan said, he's been doing this for a long time, but he doesn't know anything. All he knows is what he's done on his personal land. Evan knows a lot. Don't get me wrong. Don't let Evan fool you either. He knows a lot of information. He's the go-to guy, but we don't know anything. And all we're doing is going through trials and tribulations and figuring out how things work in the particular area that we've been stewards of. And that's what we do. And that's why we learn from each other, because what Evan's doing at, I don't know what elevation he's at, but maybe 2,300, maybe a little bit, give or take. And then what somebody's doing at 2,100 could be a significant difference. It could be a significant difference in pests. It can be a significant difference in climate, soil content, organic material, acidicness versus alkaline. There's so many different aspects that can change here, specifically in Maui. So having all of us be such a tight-knit community in that sense of agriculture, and we're all working towards the same goal. I don't want to be a Mahi Pono, or I don't want to be a Monsanto in the sense of, I want to be the biggest farmer in the world so everybody knows me. I want to build micro farms. I want to help farmers build their farms. I want to help people who want to build a farm. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's what's going to create food security and food sovereignty, is that a lot of little people are growing food, and it doesn't take these huge monoculture, if you're farming 40 acres of this, if you're farming 1 acre of the same thing, it's monoculture. So there is a lot of diversity in the sense of Central Valley and what's going on, but it's all monoculture plots. I mean, yeah, I have 40 acres of citrus. It's still monoculture. I have 20 acres of potatoes. It's still monoculture. There's no intercropping or intertwining of designing that permaculture food forest that allows things to kind of feed into each other.
And hopefully we, in what we're doing, will create enough influence to give some of those larger farmers a better idea and show them. And
right.
Thank you for all you do. I mean, you're a very important part, not only of our project, Regenitech. Can you imagine if the whole world had people like Niles James? What a better place this would be.
Might drive people crazy.
A little craziness is good.
Right.
Thank you for taking the time. I know it's been hard for us to find the time.
Yeah, thank you for being patient.
Oh, of course.
Things are always changing on the farm.
So we're going to be back in a few days. You won't know it on the other end. It might be part of the same show or separate. So you can see the pieces of how the feasibility study is laid out for this Regenitech product. Super slime. I love that's a fun word. But even the early results are so dramatic. You know, they're all over the world, but we're now doing it here. It's dramatic when you see something growing like this and the next one's like this, and it's only been 6 or 7 weeks, and it's gigantic difference. And then you dig into the soil and see that difference that you don't see. But then, you know, you're building the soil. And then the next generation of product is even better. I mean, that's what's so great about this. This is an accumulation of good. You don't have to think one crop next, got to start from scratch. Everything is building. It's getting better and better. Like you say, more on the front end creates an easier life on the back end.
Right.
And if we haven't done the front end, now's to do the heavy lifting. Now's for us to really dig in and save our planet and save our future.
Yeah, there's no shortcuts in farming, whether you put the work on the front end or the back end. And so what industrial agriculture does is they put it on the back end. And what I mean by putting that on the back end is that they're now so confused with why they're not getting yields, is because they took shortcuts in the very beginning, such as synthetic fertilizers, and now they're paying the price for it. And now they have so much work on the back end to transition out of that style that's where we're at. And that's why micro farms are now becoming more and more prominent, because they don't deal with that much torment onto the soil, and that's what they focus on, is soil health.
Niles, thank you for taking the time to join me here today.
I appreciate you.